Right, good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for the slight delay in getting to you guys, and welcome to this fireside chat. I'm delighted to have two very special individuals with me today on this conversation that we're going to be having around innovations and entrepreneurship and the ecosystem. Both of these individuals have a wealth and stealth of experience. They've done a lot. I'm not going to take away from anything that they're going to say when they introduce themselves to you. But today we really want to kind of touch base on what is innovation, how innovation works, entrepreneurship, the challenges that entrepreneurs face, especially with such uncertainty, where most people are thinking about businesses failing, and because of the pandemic and what's happened with COVID-19, there are others that are actually rising and increasing their opportunities. So we're going to, for the next sort of 20 to 25 minutes, we're going to be going through a lot of this stuff. But before we get into it, I want to introduce both my guests in. Claire Cockerton, it would be great for you to introduce yourself and just tell all our audiences a little bit about you.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here participating in this great summit. My name is Claire Cockerton. So I'm a Canadian with an architecture background, did an MBA at Imperial College, and I studied business incubators, technology transfer institutions. How do you support entrepreneurship? And I've been setting up innovation centers over the last 12 years, both backed by corporates, backed by real estate developers, and backed by government. And my core ethos is my work has been about creating the infrastructure, the services, and the community to support innovation and entrepreneurship. A few projects to name: Level 39, the FinTech Accelerator in Canary Wharf; Flexel, the Innovation Center on the Olympic Park; Lorca, the Cybersecurity Accelerator Program; and Innovate Finance, the trade body for FinTech innovation.
So I haven't been that busy then at all.
No, it's just breezy.
Oh, wow. Well, the next person I'm introducing, Joel. How do you match that? Over to you, Joel.
Well, I can't. But it's amazing, amazing to be here. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of, a fantastic day so far. Joel Blake, been involved in developing entrepreneurial support, entrepreneur ecosystems for the past 15 years. All as an entrepreneur in my own right. So I've created businesses, networks, programs, been an advisor to government, number 10, around entrepreneurial development. My key pillars are around inclusion, fintech, and entrepreneurial leadership. So those are the three areas that I really love. And so over the years, I've just been really passionate about looking at what we're doing to develop entrepreneurs individually, but also how do we develop the ecosystems that they're a part of. And really that inclusive business support growth agenda, that's definitely where I sit. Day to day, I run a fintech company called the GFA Exchange, where we support financial lenders and investors with better information around business performance. Also president of the Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce, looking at how we can help more of our businesses grow internationally. Vis-a-vis Brexit, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Yes, I will say the B word. We need to do something a bit more about that to help our businesses, but hey. So that's me.
Well, as long as you said that B word and not another B word, that's absolutely amazing. And wow, guys, if you're watching this kind of live, you're in for a treat. If you've got any questions, get them on. There is a little box that you can press to get your questions in, and my team will get those over to me so I can address them to the guys here. So. One of the things that Claire had mentioned in her synopsis before was in today's world of drastic technological, social, and economic change, all organizations need to prioritize innovation and entrepreneurship to survive. No matter how large or small you are as a business or an organization, there is nothing certain in our future plans. This year has been completely off plan for everyone in this perspective. Claire, let's start with you. Why does innovation and entrepreneurship need to be prioritized today more so than ever before?
Yes, well, for many different reasons. First, I'll start with the massive social change that's happening to our world. these great divides between tribalization and globalization, this populist movement, these movements between being part of the global economy and being focused on local development. I think socially we're becoming more aware, more cognizant of human problems. And with the Black Lives Matter movement that happened this year, with the great movement to empower and properly give place for the LGBTQ plus community. And as we deal with immigration issues, we have major social change happening right now. And we have to think to ourselves about how we are solving for some of these challenges, how we are including a full range of humanity in the businesses that we're setting up and the customers that we're servicing. And I think we have a much broader landscape about humanity and who we are as customers and as actors in the world. I think economically, obviously, we're facing a big contraction. We are on the brink, in the midst of an economic recession, and we don't really know how to quantify that just yet, because the support systems are still in place because of COVID from the government. But come March, when some of the support systems are finished, we will see even further contraction. And of course, with the Brexit issue looming, we are wondering about our trade relationships with key economic and trade partners. So we are facing a contraction, lots of talent now moving out in the marketplace. And we're seeing an increase in unemployment applications, unemployment assistance applications. So how are we going to address these economic and social changes? And I haven't even talked about what we normally talk about at conferences, which is the great technology change of the fourth industrial revolution and how that's changing our world. But putting all of that aside, just thinking about the social and economic for a moment, we absolutely need to prioritize supporting the creation of new companies, which are providing new products and services to solve some of these global challenges and local challenges. And we need to prioritize innovation, because if you're operating in an organization, all of a sudden this year, some of the basic tenets upon which you've built your business, being able to travel, being able to go and be together in a room, being able to get on a plane, all of these things are now not certain. So we need to think about how we pivot our business. There's so many examples, but think of the fine dining restaurant who now is now providing takeaway service overnight, and we are all having to pivot. And so I think we need to, as a country, prioritize the support of the creation of new companies, and culturally support entrepreneurship, the real venturing out and the courage to do so and potentially fail at it. And as organizations, we have to prioritize being highly resourceful, because we're not going to have access to the same kind of money that we've had in the past. We can't depend upon the same international markets, which we have been connected to in the past. So we have to be incredibly resourceful. We have to constantly be seeking the next opportunity. What's the next product or next innovation? What's the next value add that we can provide to our customers? And so as organizations, as entrepreneurs, we need to be constantly hungry in order to stay relevant.
I mean, it's interesting you bring that, and Joel, I kind of want to bring you in with your viewpoint on the importance of it and why it needs to be prioritized. But I also want to take you back a little bit to the recession of 2008. There's it's although this is kind of pandemic related, guys, we are in effect in another recession, the same we were in 2008. There's a huge job losses, lots of uncertainty. Joel, you and I worked a lot on the whole kind of transition of that startup loan scheme, which kind of was there to stimulate the economy and people to drive, as what Claire was talking about, in terms of starting up businesses. Now, the net of new jobs won't be created by these startups, because it takes a couple of years for them to really get off the ground. So adding to what Claire has said with regards to prioritization, I also want you to bring your perspective on what challenges entrepreneurs face today compared to what we were facing maybe sort of almost 10 years ago with regards to how we're bringing forward. I mean, the examples are there of, you know, like the fine dining restaurant that's now a takeaway service, and the word pivot is very, very relevant. But what's your kind of take on that, and what's your what can you add to the conversation here?
I think that the journey that we've been on from the recession to now has been an amazing one for us all, good and bad. But I think one thing that Claire really, really highlights is that sense of inclusive innovation. I think quite often we look at ways in which we need to pivot, need to change, need to move, how to survive. But often we can retrench back into a much more silo mentality in order to make that happen. And I think the world has shown that we need to be more inclusive than ever before. The social change, again, that Claire talked about there, that's now even more important when it comes to high growth entrepreneurs, high growth businesses who now need to be, who are now the leaders, whether they want to be or not, if they get through this period that we're in now, to be able to kind of create the future that we don't know about yet. And so the inclusive level of talent, the inclusive way in which they engage with their ecosystem, the way they engage with their stakeholders, that's going to drive this change. And so for me, often diversity and inclusion is often put to these political silos. I think we need to kind of step back from that and look at inclusion from the widest sense in all shapes and sizes, and in fact put inclusion at the center of anything that we do. Because whether it's about people, whether it's about systems, whether it's about processes, whether it's about the ecosystem, there has to be an honest dialogue, an honest connection, and a level of authenticity about how we then build whatever the future will need to look like. Because none of us right now know what that is going to look like, but we can certainly all play a part in that. So I think there's something around that which I really think is really, really important. And I think just on top of that, going back to the startup loans and startup Britain days, etc., you know, there's energy, there's passion, there's drive, and there's enthusiasm. But there's also a deeper sense of realism now about what could go wrong and how we're going to mitigate our future with the reality that we're living now. Because the passion will only take you so far. We know that when it comes to startup businesses trying to get to that scale-up phase. But even more importantly now, we can't just rely on the drive and the passion entrepreneurs have. We have to build an inclusive ecosystem around them so that they can thrive even more with all that inclusive change.
I mean, it is, and I think what I want to kind of add here, and again, Claire, just bring you in very quickly on this, is it wasn't just things like startup loans. There was Innovate UK, and I think we were on a real upward trend of promoting and showcasing the UK as you know, as a driver of innovation. You had the SME instrumentation, the Horizon 2020. You had all these things that were going, and then the Chancellor of Exchequer decides to cut business services, you know, to a certain by 17%. That dropped this whole support program, the catapult centers, all this stuff started to go. Do you think we are actually having to reinvent the wheel again when it comes to how we become innovative and, you know, our entrepreneurial spirit? Or do you think it's a thing where you know, we need to start looking and re-identifying that culture? I know Joel talks about the sort of diversity and the inclusion part of this, but what about from the support services? Like, you know, you've been involved with things like Innovate Finance and you know, Level 39 and all this. How do you feel we've gone backwards, you know, up till now, and now we've got to kind of re-push that button to go forwards again?
Yeah, great question. I think certainly some government funding has been cut, and clearly our government has been extremely distracted for the last few years, which is a huge shame. I think right now we're seeing other players come to the table. So we're seeing corporate investment in setting up more open ecosystems, supporting the startup community, providing more free services, resources, software, mentoring, professional services that are startup friendly. So we're seeing the corporate world starting to participate in driving entrepreneurship and innovation. Of course, they have their own agenda for it too, because they're, you know, they're talent sourcing, and they're trying to understand the technology change that's happening, and they're trying to position themselves to retain their market share, of course. But you're seeing more participation from that space. We're also seeing universities think differently about entrepreneurship. We know that universities are now realizing that they can't rest on their laurels, their big brand, and expect the world to buy this British education if it is not connected to industry and to opportunities that support an entrepreneurial path. So many young people, they want to be entrepreneurs. They're not going to climb the same old corporate ladder. So universities are starting to set up much more complex and supportive innovation centers. Imperial College is one, and I've just recently finished work with Leeds University. They've just built this huge innovation center called Nexus, and that is really about supporting the startup ecosystem, both outside of the university, but also their staff and student entrepreneurs who want to spin out. And it's providing them physical space, lab space, virtual membership, as well as support services, professional services like legal and accounting and branding, and that kind of thing. So we're seeing new players come to the table to help drive the innovation entrepreneurship agenda forward, and that's fantastic. But I'm currently running a government program for Leeds City Region, government-backed program for Leeds City Region, supporting early stage entrepreneurs. So these sort of pre-accelerators, and I think that's an important role for the government to play now. Is how do we take this understimulated talent or unemployed talent at the moment that has come from industry and get them actually to market, get them to MVP, get them to market, get them first customers, maybe get them some seed investment. And I think that's a really critical role for government to play right now.
I mean, you are absolutely right. And Boris, if you're watching this by any chance, because I know you're isolating, listen to what Claire's saying here. The next thing I want to do, Boris, is listen to what Joel's about to talk about. We have a question that's coming in. I think, Joel, you're very, very well placed for this one. How important is it to identify potential entrepreneurialism in our young people and future talent at a young age? And what age do you think we should be looking for that future potential? I know you've done stuff through Britain. We've worked together on a number of different projects about, not just from universities, from college, and in terms of getting like the 18-year-old entrepreneur moving forward. You've got people like Jamal Edwards who have come out and absolutely blitzed, their industries. You've got people like Mark Pearson, the chairman of Events, who at such a tender age sold my batch of codes and actually is now driving things forward. Just to add on to what Claire said about, this whole thing about nurturing the talent, where do you see from that question? Could you give us?
Yeah, I think if we can get young people engaged in entrepreneurship for as young as possible, and I'm talking 8-9 years old onwards, I think that's a perfect age because they're still at that stage where they're allowed to dream. And as we get older as adults, that starts to get beaten out of us through life, right? I wanted to be an astronaut, I want to be a doctor. By the time you get to real life, that changes. But I think the purity and the innocence of entrepreneurial minds in young people is something that we should nurture as early as possible. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that we also have to give them is the realistic view on what that journey means. Because as young entrepreneurs, they've got to be able to be resilient enough and be willing to face those challenges head on, because the novelty of being an entrepreneur, as we know, is one that we can easily get sucked into. And then when the reality hits, you've got to have that skill and that character and that leadership skill as a young entrepreneur, let alone an older entrepreneur, to get through those challenges. So we need to make sure our young people are being equipped with those skills to get them through. But I think also in terms of the international piece, we have to remember that we're living in a global world. So for me, that's a global world that's now local. Your competition is no longer the person on the same street, it's someone on the other side of the world. So when we talk about the millennial generation and the more dynamic world that we're in, there's something around helping our young people to think global as early as possible, but have the ecosystems happening and connecting globally to make sure they can scale those ideas and use that skill and talent in an international market so they can facilitate that growth for themselves at that level. I mean, it's something I certainly see in some international work I'm involved in, where you look at the comparative demographics of our young people and young people in other countries, particularly in the Far East, and it's a completely different culture, a different mindset, but there's an ecosystem that's supporting them to a degree, and I think more of that would need to happen here.
Well, I think it's really good. And Claire, I kind of want to bring you back in here with the work that you've been doing as well in terms of these acceleration, innovation clusters, building that kind of ecosystem. There are so many different components to this. There's the universities, institutions, the financial side of things, the banking, the government legislations, you've got businesses, corporate, all of these kind of modules in. Joel refers to like the millennial generation, and innovation now needs to be open. It needs to be intergenerational. There is obviously a certain level of perspective that a young person can bring to an innovation process. And then there's a certain perspective that a more experienced person would bring. What do you believe we need to do, or what is it that you guys are doing at the moment to really kind of rubber stamp that, where I guess our ecosystems are much more connected, I guess?
Yeah, we sometimes idolize the young person entrepreneur, but actually the median age for a successful entrepreneur is like 45, and so there's tons of people who are innovating and setting up companies later in life, and there are lots of people who are doing that earlier in life. I think it's great to have a strong career behind you, an understanding of industry, understanding of the professionalism with which you need to approach setting up a business, having had role models across your career of different leadership, what to do, what not to do. So I don't think age should prevent us from putting forward an idea and rallying a team and securing financing. We do. Age shouldn't, ethnicity, background, gender, none of those things should, but we know they do because decision makers, investors have inherent biases around this. So it's very important that we support programs that push forward the talent in marginalized groups, because there is a natural bias we make against certain groups that don't fit within the mold of who belongs in a business, in the corporate world, or in the world of technology. And so I was, Joel and I were talking about this yesterday, is about the radical idea of quotas, and that a program or some funding should have space for underrepresented groups. And I know it's something we shy away from here in the UK based on our culture, and we are constantly talking about merit. But when we're operating in a system that is stacked against you, if you are a woman, if you're a person of color, if you come from a different socioeconomic background or different education, we know it's stacked against you. And so the government really needs to support, and so do corporations and universities, needs to have pathways and clear, dedicated spaces for you, even if you don't present in the way in which you expect the person to present at an interview or at an application process for an accelerator program. So we were talking about those, and I think we need to start thinking more radically now in how we are selecting talent, either onto programs or into organizations, and really carving out places for the person who doesn't necessarily fit that corporate culture or fit the mold of education that an organization has enshrined in the corporate culture.
Can I just add to that, Ketan? Because I think one of the things that I've seen missing is having entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial mindsets in the actual decision-making room when policies and strategy and support is being developed for entrepreneurs. And I think that creates a bit of a divide. Policymakers, system creators to a degree, don't always bring in the entrepreneurs. So I think having a sense of a quota, an accountability structure in place of bringing in that insight and then using those ideas to create some of those spaces and structures as Claire's described there, to make sure that you're providing the most inclusive environment for people to bring in their experience, not based on the profile that you have, but based on what they're bringing in. So that you're then bringing the best of the best in the most inclusive manner, but from the entrepreneurial and business perspective, not from a policy, this is what we think, but we've never spent a day in the life on the ground. but that's a whole different conversation.
If we had another hour, we could go through that. But sadly, we're running fast out of time. I just want to bring one point in, and then I want you guys to just kind of give us a quick wrap up, like, you know, some lasting statements, basically, that will close this session off, which has been really, really insightful. I come from an environment and a background which didn't, you know, I didn't represent the certificate, I didn't have the degree, I didn't have the, you know, like this whole thing, Claire, you talk about this corporate culture of everything needs to be in a particular shape. I'm probably the square peg trying to go into a round hole. That's how my journey started, and I've got to where I've got to and been able to sort of break the barriers. And I know there are so many other people that are doing this kind of stuff as well, but the sooner we can, as a country, as governments, as corporates, start to be open to this whole fact that, you know, a young entrepreneur has an equal stake at that table, as Joel says, as anyone else, you know, to talk about how we move things forward. The sooner we can really start to look at how we enforce this change. And that's what innovation is at the end of the day. It's a change. But the thing is, we need to change our culture and mindset first before we can actually do any of that, as it is. So look, with just kind of like a 30-second bit, really, because we're now fast out of time. Claire, what one thing would you like to say around sort of innovation and entrepreneurship in the UK, and what advice would you give to our audiences watching this today? And then Joel, over to you as well, please. So first with you, Claire.
Okay, you've given me an impossible question to end on. 30 seconds. I don't have this grand advice. I think I have a bit of micro advice, and the micro advice is, this is a crazy time that has destabilized every person on the planet. Everybody is suffering a little bit. Everybody is struggling with their relationships and their careers and their world. So at least we're not alone in that, even though we are in our own rooms and a bit alone in one respect. And so I think we need to take this moment as an opportunity to reflect, to connect with ourselves, understand what is moving in us, what ideas, what character traits, and how might we open up ourselves to other possibilities, and how might we use this opportunity for personal development, for better understanding of our leadership capabilities, for a better understanding of the other person and other communities that we need to reach. And I think we need to get very human and very personal now, because it has hit everybody, you know, the current crisis. So I suppose it's to look inward as well, is my micro advice.
And Joel, over to you. Lasting words.
For me, it's very, very simple. It's for me, never forget where you come from, because all the lessons and the journey, that's what brought you to this point, good and bad. But at the same time, never forget where you're going, because where you set your destination is where you're going to end up. And there's so much lessons that you've learned from that journey. And so that reflection point is so key, that Claire has said right there, because it gives you a chance to say, you know what, it might not be ideal now, but look what I've gone through and I'm still here. What does my future look like, and what can I learn in order to take me there? And I think if we can reflect and rejuvenate and refresh, we can make that happen. All of us individually and all of us as an ecosystem.
I love it. I love it, guys. And do you know what? I wish we had another hour to go through this. I'm going to have to, do you know what? I'm just going to have to make another summit and start it again. And we're going to have to come back and do this again, right? Listen, Claire, Joel, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor having you on. Thank you so much for your insights. Guys, you know, if you're watching this, go and check out, connect with the guys, you know, afterwards if you've got any other questions itself. But listen, thank you both for coming on. And I hope everyone else is enjoying the summit and on to the next sessions. Thanks a lot, guys.